Hi, macro students. It's finally Miss G reporting to you from my garage. Going over today 3.8. This is actually going to be your last section of Unit 3, 3.8 Fiscal Policy. Okay, so a lot of times the government is asked or steps in because the economy is either in a recessionary gap, like we are right now, or an inflationary gap. The economy is kind of like a car. I like this analogy. You can drive 120 miles per hour in most cars, but it's not sustainable. This is when the economy would have extremely low unemployment. This would be an inflationary gap. Driving 20 miles per hour, though, is too slow. The car can easily go faster. That's our economy right now because we are all doing self-isolation, stay in place. But 70 miles per hour is sustainable, and that's what we're going to call full employment. Some cars have the capacity to drive faster than others. In the economy, industrial nations do have more capacity than, say, a third world nation. If the engine or the technology or the gas mileage, aka productivity in economics, increase, then we possibly can shift our long run aggregate supply curve to the right. Remember, that's your vertical line. The government often speeds up or slows down the economy by using fiscal policy or monetary policy. The role of consumers in the economy, very important. Consumption is the most important part of the economy. Consumers will spend a certain amount no matter what, regardless of their income. This is called autonomous consumption. This is usually to pay for the necessities, toilet paper, electricity, things like that, rent. Consumer spending is made up of autonomous spending and disposable income after taxes. If incomes are less than autonomous spending, then there is savings. Maybe you are putting everything on a credit card, right? Because you need to buy the necessities and you don't have enough money. Well, what if incomes fall and people stop buying things? This is so prevalent to today, right? We have a lot of different things that are shutting down. Fish Enterprise Company will never reopen. Well, who is stepping in? Well, that's going to be the government. Okay, well, how does the government stabilize the economy? Well, we have two different things we can use. We have fiscal policy, and this is actions by Congress that stabilize the economy. And then we have monetary policy. This is actions by the Federal Reserve Bank to stabilize the economy. In Chapter 3, we are only focusing on fiscal policy, so actions by Congress to stabilize the economy. Here we go. We have two tools in our fiscal policy box. We can either increase or decrease government spending or increase or decrease taxes. Those are our two options for fiscal policy. Later, or actually it's already posted, but I have posted one of Clifford's videos for you on fiscal policy. There are two different types of fiscal policy: discretionary versus non-discretionary. Discretionary are they're actions essentially that happen in the moment. So this would be a new bill that is designed to change the aggregate demand through the government spending or taxation. Well, what's happened now is that Trump has passed the $2 trillion stimulus, right? And Congress has signed it. That is because we need people to be spending money, and that will increase the aggregate demand, getting us out of this negative output gap. So there's going to be a quiz question that asks, okay, what type of fiscal policy is Donald Trump passing right now? Well, that would be a discretionary fiscal policy. It's in the moment. This doesn't always happen. versus non-discretionary fiscal policy, also known as automatic stabilizers, are already a part of all of our rules and regulations. So these are permanent spending or taxation laws enacted to work countercyclically to stabilize the economy. When GDP goes down, government spending automatically increases and taxes will automatically fall. Things like welfare, unemployment, and income tax are examples of non-discretionary fiscal policy. So you'll have a quiz question asking, I'm pretty sure if welfare is non-discretionary or discretionary fiscal policy. Okay, well, we have two different types of gaps. We have an inflationary gap, and in that case, we would need contractionary fiscal policy. This would be the brake in our car example. Well, the government can do two things or a combo of these two things. If we are in a positive output gap, they could decrease their spending or increase taxes or a combination of the two. Okay, but if we are in a recessionary gap or a negative output gap, right, like we are now, well, what could the government do to get us out of this? Well, they could either increase their spending or decrease taxes or a combination of the two. So essentially, fiscal policy, we have two options: increase or decrease government spending, or increase or decrease taxes. Let's take a look at our first example. If my timer goes off, I will have to restart this movie just because it's easier for me to upload smaller videos. Okay, let's look here. It looks like right now in this economy, they are producing here, okay, at P1 and at 500 billion real GDP. But look right here where our full employment line is. It's to the right. Okay, so what type of gap would this be? This would be a recessionary gap, or a negative output gap. Anytime we are in a recessionary or negative output gap, those words mean the same thing. We will need to use expansionary fiscal policy in order to get us producing at full employment. There's always going to be two options of expansionary fiscal policy, and that would be to increase government spending or decrease taxes. What is the least amount of initial government spending to close the gap? We're going to bring back the multiplier from 3.2. Well, it looks like the gap right here that we need to close is 500 billion. Let's first calculate our multiplier. Recall that the spending multiplier is simply 1 over MPS. Okay, well, it gives us that the MPC is 0.8, so we know that the MPS is 0.2. 1 divided by 0.2 is 5. 5 times now the amount of spending must close the gap, and the gap was 500. So 5 times what is going to equal 500? That would be $100 billion would close this gap. All right, let's go on to our next example. Here we have another economy, but it looks like we're actually producing at 100 when really the full employment is at 80. So what type of gap is this? We're speeding ahead. We're going 120 miles per hour. We have very low unemployment. It is not sustainable. So this is an inflationary gap, or the AP test likes to say positive output gap. Output. Well, anytime we have an inflationary gap or a positive output gap, we were going to need contractionary fiscal policy. There are always two options for contractionary fiscal policy, and that is to decrease government spending or increase taxes. How much is needed to close the gap? So we're going to need to decrease spending by how much? Well, let's first calculate our multiplier. Again, the multiplier is 1 over the marginal propensity to save. In this case is 1 over 0.5, and that equals 2. So 2 times how much spending do we have to cut to close this gap right here? The gap is $20 billion. So 2 times what is going to give us 20 billion? Well, that's going to be 2 times 10, right, equals 20. So they're going to have to cut spending by $10 billion in order to get us back on track. Well, we've just talked about spending, but what about taxes? That's also a tool of fiscal policy. It looks like here we are in a recessionary gap, right? So we are in a recessionary gap. We are producing under what we should be producing. Well, what are our two options of a recessionary gap? Well, we could increase government spending, or we could decrease taxes. And we're going to do both of these here. So let's look at number 2 first. How much government spending to close the gap? Well, let's calculate our spending multiplier. So this is number 2. Our spending multiplier is going to be 1 over MPS. In that case, it's 1 over 0.2 because our marginal propensity to consume is 0.8. That gives us 5. So 5 times the spending must equal the gap. Well, the gap looks like it is from 80 to 100 billion, so the gap is 20. Well, 5 times how much will give us 20? Well, that's going to be 5 times 4 will give us 20. So here you go. You see that that's going to be $4 billion. Well, they could also decrease, cut taxes, right? So let's do number 3. Remember that the tax multiplier is just going to be equal to the spending multiplier minus 1. So our spending multiplier here was 5. So 5 minus 1, that's going to equal 4. So our tax multiplier is 4. All right, so we're going to do 4 times how much we cut taxes by to close this gap of 20. All right, well, that's going to be 4 times 5, right, is going to equal, whoops, you can't see, sorry. 4 times 5 is going to be that number. So 5 billion right here is our tax cut. So you'll have a few questions like that on the quiz coming up. All right, what else do we have here? I am going to, sorry, that's just my timer. I'm going to actually just go over one last thing, and then you can go over the rest of the multiple choice by yourself, and I've also attached this video link. The hard thing about fiscal policy is sometimes, well, a lot of times, it takes a while to go into effect. And these are the 3 different causes for these time lags. I mean, people are expecting their stimulus checks very fast right now, but it takes a lot of operational lag and planning, administrative lag. Congress had to sign it. Recognition lag. Well, we first needed to realize how bad this pandemic was before something happened. So fiscal policy just takes a while just because of the way our government is set up. And that's it for 3.8. Thank you.